Chapter 17 of Jewish Children by Sholem Aleichem. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Jewish Children, Yudishe Kinder by Sholem Aleichem, translated by Hannah Berman, and read by Adrian Pretzelis. Chapter 17. The Pocket Knife. Listen, children, and I will tell you a story about a little knife. Not an invented story, but a true one that happened to myself. I never wished for anything in the world so much as for a pocket knife. It should be my own, and should lie in my pocket, and I should be able to take it out whenever I wished, to cut whatever I liked. Let my friends know. I had just begun to go to school under Yossel Dardaki, and I already had a knife. That is, what was almost a knife. I made it myself. I tore a goose quill out of a feather brush, cut off one end, and flattened out the other. I pretended it was a knife, and would cut. "What sort of feather is that? What the devil does it mean? Why do you carry a feather about with you?" asked my father, a sickly Jew, with a yellow wrinkled face. He had a fit of coughing. "Here are feathers for you, play toys." "What do you care if the child plays?" asked my mother of him. She was a short-built woman, and wore a silk scarf on her head. "Let my enemies eat out their brains." Later, when I was learning the Bible and the commentaries, I very nearly had a real knife, also of my own making. I found a bit of steel belonging to my mother's crinoline, and I set it very cleverly into a piece of wood. I sharpened the steel beautifully on a stone, and naturally cut all my fingers to pieces. "See how he has bled himself, that son of yours," said my father. He took hold of my hands in such a way that the very bones cracked. "He's a fine fellow." "Ah, may the thunder strike me!" cried my mother. She took the little knife from me and threw it into the fire. She took no notice of my crying, "Now it will come to an end, woe is me!" I soon got another knife, but in reality a little knife. It had a thick round wooden handle like a barrel, and a curved blade which opened as well as closed. You want to know how I came by it? I saved up the money from what I got for my breakfasts and bought the knife for 7 groshens from Solomon, and owed him 3 more groshens. Oh, how I loved it, how I loved it! I came home from school black and blue, hungry and sleepy, and with my ears well boxed. You see, I had just started learning the Gemara from Mottel, the angel of death. "If an ox gore a cow," I learnt. And if an ox gores a cow, then I must get beaten. And the first thing I did was to take out my pocket knife from under the black cupboard. It lay there the whole day because I dared not take it to school with me, and at home no one must know that I have a knife. I stroked it, I cut a piece of paper with it, I split a straw in halves, and then cut up my bread into little cubes which I stuck on the tip of the blade and afterwards put into my mouth. Later, before going to bed, I cleaned the knife and scrubbed it and polished it. I took the sharpening stone which I found in the hayloft, spit on it, and in silence began to work, sharpening the little knife, sharpening. My father, his little round cap on his head, sat over a book. He coughed and read and coughed. My mother was in the kitchen making bread. I did not cease from sharpening my knife and sharpening it. Suddenly my father woke up, as from a deep sleep. Who is making that hissing noise? Who is working? What are you doing, you young scamp?" He stood beside me and bent over my sharpening stone. He caught hold of my ear. A fit of coughing choked him. "Ha, ha, ha, little knives," said my father, and he took the knife and the sharpening stone from me. "Such a scamp! Why the devil can't he take a book into his hand?" I began to cry. My father improved the situation by a few slaps. My mother ran in from the kitchen, her sleeves turned up, and she began to shout. "Shah! Shah! What's the matter here? Why do you beat him? God be with you! What have you against the child? Woe is me!" "Little knives," said my father, ending up with a cough. "A tiny child, such a devil! Why the devil can't he take a book into his hand? He's already a youth of 8 years. I will give you pocket knives, you good-for-nothing you, in the middle of everything. Pocket knives! But what had he against my little knife? How had it sinned in his eyes? Why was he so angry? I remember that my father was nearly always ailing, always pale and hollow-cheeked, and always angry with the whole world. For the least thing he flared up and would tear me to pieces. It was fortunate my mother defended me. She took me out of his hands. And that pocket knife of mine was thrown away somewhere. For 8 days on end I looked and looked for it, but could not find it. I mourned deeply for that curved knife, the good knife. How dark and embittered was my soul at school when I remembered that I would come home with a swollen face, with red torn ears from the hands of Mottle, the angel of death, because an ox gored a cow, and I would have no one to turn to for comfort. I was lonely without the curved knife, lonely as an orphan. No one saw the tears I shed in silence in my bed at night after I had come back from Cheder. In silence I cried my eyes out. In the morning I was again at Cheder, and again I repeated, "If an ox gore a cow," and again I felt the blows of Mottle, the angel of death. Again my father was angry, coughed and swore at me. I had not a free moment. I did not see a smiling face. There was not a single little smile for me anywhere, not a single one. I had nobody. I was alone, all alone in the whole world. A year went by, and perhaps a year and a half. I was beginning to forget the curved knife. It seems I was destined to waste all the years of my childhood because of pocket knives. A new knife was created, to my misfortune, a brand new knife, a beauty, a splendid one. As I live, it was a fine knife. It had 2 blades, fine steel ones, sharp as razors, and a white bone handle, and brass ends, and copper rivets. I tell you it was a beauty, a real good pocket knife. How came to me such a fine knife that was never meant for such as I? That is a whole story, a sad but interesting story. Listen to me attentively. What value in my eyes had the German Jew who lodged with us, the contractor, Herr Herzenherz? When he spoke Yiddish, went about without a cap, had no beard or earlocks, and had his coat-tails cut off. I ask you, how could I have helped laughing into his face when that Jewish Gentile or Gentilish Jew talked to me in Yiddish, but a curious Yiddish with a lot of ahs in it? "Well, dear boy, what portion of the law will be read this week?" Ha ha! I burst out laughing and hid my face in my hands. Say, my dear child, what portion of the Law will be read this week?" "Ha, ha, ha! Belak!